All right. Well, yeah, Justin, thanks for showing up, even amidst all the technical difficulties. But yeah, so there's a lot of people, a lot of new people that I may have not been had a chance to meet, but Jack's here, CO the 13th, and Justin and I go back a ways. We were together. We went on float together with a 13th Mu back in the day, Marine, U.S. Marine Corps. We were stationed in Pendleton together, San Diego, and Justin, I think you're still in San Diego, aren't you?
Yeah, San Marcos, North County, San
Marcos.
Diego. I was,
yeah. Lucky. But I won't spend a lot of time talking because I know that I'm not. I don't have much interesting to say right here. But yeah, we went on float together, and then Justin went on and decided that the ground game wasn't his bag of tea, and went to the pilot program. And I think, as most of you know, if you looked at some of the info we put out, he went on and had a great career as a Hornet pilot, and then has continued a great career with Delta Airlines. But with I'm just going to stop there and just say welcome, Justin. We'd love to hear maybe a little bit about just how you got where you are now, and
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so take it away.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for having me, guys. If it gets loud in here, I apologize. The dog's about to lose their minds. We had pizza coming for the boys before baseball practice. So if it starts going mass hysteria, I'll try to keep it as calm as we can. But yeah, so yeah, Jack and I was a landing support battalion ground officer with a 0402 logistics and transportation MOS for 4 years. I'd always wanted to fly, but probably similarly to Jack's, I contracted right after Somalia, and it was in the middle of the Clinton drawdown, and there were no flight slots. So it was either go ground or go home. So I decided to give it a shot, and of course they told me that I would pick up a flight slot in the basic school in Quantico. No problem. 4 years later, it actually came through while Jack and I were in the same unit. I can't remember if you were at the CP that day, but it was back. This is, no blue mail, email was the only thing we had. I actually had a message center, and I got a phone call from a buddy of mine that said, "Hey, congrats, man." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm a first lieutenant. I'm not getting promoted anytime soon." And he's like, "No, man, flight school. You're going flying." And after, 20, I guess I would have been 24 at that time, 23, and a lifelong goal to fly. And it was just about getting to the point where I was about to give up. I'd applied a couple of times, didn't get accepted. And the Marine Corps is real smart with knowing what your time commitments are. I owed them 4 years, and at the 3.5-year mark, I got accepted for the flight program. So because I was a team player and I couldn't leave my buddy Michael Jackson alone on deployment, I went on the deployment instead of going right off to flight school. And it was really the best decision I think I could have ever made. That deployment that we all went on with our friends is still one of my favorites. And then came back from that and launched off to flight school in Pensacola, jets in Mississippi, and then F-18 training in San Diego. And then the catch-up game began where, I'm 3.5, 4 years behind everybody who got commissioned in my time frame that's now out in the fleet. So it was just a fire hose for 4.5 years, went all the way from brand new guy to mission commander, air combat tactics instructor, all the qualifications in 4 years. And then went off to do my FAC tour, came back, department head tours, command of a squadron in Beaufort, and then group operations, group XO, and then I retired and went off to Delta. So that's kind of the big overall big picture stuff. A lot of paths in the middle of all that and how things worked out the way they did. But that's the big picture story. I kind of want to throw it back to you guys here and there if you guys have questions along the way, or I can I can keep talking or do whatever you guys want to do here. Is it, you guys see me okay? I'm trying to see. I've tried to go outside, but I guess it wasn't working out so well. But we may try it again, see if I can get the dogs calm down and be outside with y'all, but we'll see.
Technology. You'd think that after the last couple of years, we would have had this Zoom thing down.
Yeah, no kidding. Not a lot of zooming in the cockpit, so I'm kind of a rookie.
True. You're not on Zoom calls between during flights, right? Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and start off with the questioning then. Any good LSO bolter stories or worse landing conditions?
Yeah, luckily you can all see it on online. It was the Carrier PBS documentary was actually my 2005 cruise, and I was one of the guys flying during the episode where they had the pitching decks when we went around a hurricane, and there was no clouds, there was no weather, but the seas that it picked up were tossing around the Nimitz about plus or minus 30 to 40 feet of movement. And we had 8 airplanes that were still airborne when they canceled the flight schedule to land. And they took, we were the last day launch. And by the time that they recovered all the airplanes, I think it was 4.5 hours, and it usually takes 20 minutes. And they got everybody back. Yeah, it was horrifying. It's the only time I've ever had them calculate an ejection fuel state. So if you hit, we had no divert, no nothing. It was like, if you hit this fuel state, you're going to pull up alongside of the boat and shell out. And we talked to the guys who were airborne later on. I was like, you guys really pulled over to the side and shell out? And they're like, hell no, man. We can't land on this thing. Who's going to come get us? So it would have been like, yeah, we're good. Keep it coming. But so I went around twice, and on the third time, which was my bingo on the ball crap before I would have had to go to the tanker, I made it down, and it was about the ugliest landing I've ever had. But I was in the wire. I didn't break the airplane, and no big deal. The Marine was the first one down, so that's the way it goes. But that video, though, unfortunately, to your question with the LSO stories, what I found the most significant, and I don't know if it was a Navy thing where they kind of limited the audio, at nighttime, when you come off the Marshall stack, you're alternated between approach frequencies with button 15 and 17 on the dial, I think it was, for approach. So the guy that you're listening to ahead of you is actually 2 airplanes in front of you. So you're about, 10 mile separation, 15 mile separation, listening to what's going on. And you would just hear these blood curdling, power, wave off, blower, go around, and then silence. And then take Angels 1.2, turn left to the downwind. And you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, is he alive? And you're like looking around your head to try to see if you can see a big giant fireball. And that of all the years of all the traps I had, that was just hearing the collection of those voices from paddles was scarier than coming in to do it yourself. And the craziest thing is, like I say, the weather at altitude at 1,200 feet before you start your pitch over was totally fine. Absolutely no turbulence in the air, nothing. It was these swells. So your HUD was worthless. Your instruments were worthless, which is totally counter to anything you think about with guys telling you to trust your instruments. But the boat was moving so bad that it was nothing. So all you were doing was trying to gauge your lineup and then setting about a 700 foot per minute descent rate. And then paddles would give you power and easy with it commands to try to get you in sync with the back of the ship and then bring you in. And we got everybody aboard. Not a single broken airplane, not a single ejection, not a single ramp strike. That was all because all we were doing was, following instructions. The paddles brought us all in safely. So I don't know if that was a long answer to your question, but you can all see it. It's on TV.
I'm actually curious. I'm curious if the LSOs give you an easier grade for, or is that noted that pitching deck
Oh
is
yeah,
part
there
of
were no grades that night. Yeah, we everybody got a welcome aboard. Here's your
There
photo.
you go.
Yeah, there was nothing at that point. It was
Okay.
all Move list, and they were. Are you guys familiar with Move list? Do they have that at all, or are they aware of what it is?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
they
think
were
so.
they were doing a hand crank on that, and basically it's just instead of looking at the ball that's generated from the ship, there's one of the LSOs that has a handle, and it literally he manually moves the ball, and he has a repeater that shows him where what he's showing the pilot, and that's how they talk us in to try to get you in sync with the moving ship. And so we all got okay passes on that night.
Wow.
And the boulders didn't count.
Cool.
Wow.
All right, so
guys were hitting so hard that night. I'm sorry, the guys were hitting so hard that night that they were actually hook skipping. So they would land in the wires, and they would hit so hard it would bounce the hook. And I was already landing in the ready room watching the rest of the guys come in, and you saw this guy's hook bounce over the 1, the 3, and then he was gone. And I mean, it was like, and I think, well, this isn't even fair anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Wow.
All right. Next question is, how did you get the call sign Dodo?
Yes. Well, the good news is that it happened right when I got to the fleet. So that means that I never did anything else stupid for 17 years. So if you believe that, I got some bridges for you to buy from me. But so like I told you, I was a ground guy first. And then by the time that I got back, I got winged right before September 11th. And then there were some pipeline delays in the training command to become an F-18 pilot. So by the time, usually it takes you about a year and a half. And it was, I think by the time it was about that. I started training in January of 2002, and I finished in January of 2003. Actually, it was I think it was about February. But anyway, the entire MAG was already deployed over in Al Jaber, Kuwait, getting ready for Iraqi freedom. So initially, it looked like they were going to send me to a squadron that was on an aircraft carrier. And then they're like, no, we're going to take these. We have 3 pilots. One of the squadrons wanted 2. The Red Devils were the squadron that I went to. They needed 1. And then off we went. Well, unfortunately, during that time, the politics aside, the West Coast had a qualification where even though you were a qualified F-18 pilot, you had to go through a quote unquote combat wingman syllabus before you were allowed to fly in combat. Well, how are you going to train if you're in combat? So, and the Navy doesn't do it that way. You show up at the ship, you get put in the rotation, and you're flying with senior guys, and you go out. The Marine Corps is different for the West Coast Marine Corps. And so I got to my squadron the day the war started. I was in civilian clothes on a KLM airliner in Kuwait International Airport while Scuds were coming in at the airport. We're in civilian clothes, getting us on a bus, getting us off to Al Jaber, and I check in. Hey, here I am. And I stood radio watch for the first 3.5, 4 weeks of the war. I contemplated suicide 19 times. I'm watching these guys go out with, 6 Mark 83s and a nose full of gun and coming back empty. And I'm sitting there on the radio going, yeah, go ahead and taxi in. You're going to spot 6, and I'm going to kill myself. So I was the bird who couldn't fly. And it made it worse being Dodo because when you're standing at duty, you're the operations duty officer, the ODO. So I was the Devil operations duty officer, or the Dodo. And it was awesome. Yeah, but the good, I mean, I was there, I was with them. I did fly, but by the time that I started flying, all the really significant, taking out the highway of death stuff, all that was already over. So I did not get to play in the sandbox like all my buddies did. So it was sad, very
sad. Let's see. Going through, in your opinion, how restrictive do you feel ROEs were during your deployments?
Funny story about that, not to completely hijack the conversation, but when I was a forward air controller, it was about 2 things happened on my forward air controller tour that made me more furious in my entire existence as a Marine. First one, non-flight related, which I'll tell you in a couple of seconds or less. We had which actually involved the same engagement, ironically. I hadn't even thought about that until I was saying it to you guys. We had a Marine get wounded down in Basra. He got his bell rung. He didn't even have any flesh injury. He got a concussion. His eardrums got blown out. And I'm sure Jax will remember when somebody is injured like that, they have to do a casualty report. But the Marine Corps policy is that at all times possible, if somebody's hurt and it's not life-threatening, they call their family. That's because it is so much easier for a family to receive a phone call from their son, from their daughter, hey, I got hurt, I'm okay, versus anybody else calling them. And I was the XO of a unit called 1st Anglico. And so my job was to submit these casualty reports. And our guys were tangled up in a fight in Basra. This was 2008. And I sent off the casualty report for this kid, and these fucking asshats in Washington that were manning the duty that day took the report, and there's a line in there that says SNM, said name Marine, will notify next of kin. And she said, it was a staff sergeant, said that because it didn't say 1st Anglico shall have SNM notify next of kin, she called that family in the middle of the night and gave them no information other than their son was wounded in Basra. And I got that response back on email like within 30 seconds and lost it. On the satellite phone, tearing this person up and down, left and right. What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you even do that? And anyway, so then I called the family, which you're not supposed to do with the whole Kinko process. Got a hold of the dad and just profusely apologized to this guy and said, your son's fine. He's got busted eardrums. Turns out he was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. And as soon as he got I was a major at the time. As soon as he got a dude on the phone, he just broke down, and he couldn't speak for about 3 minutes, thanking me for calling him and letting him know that, everything's fine. And then immediately after that, got on the HF radio with my guys. And I'm like, get Johansson on the radio right now. Get him a satellite phone. I don't care what's going on. Pull him out of the fight and have him call his dad. So anyway, that I hadn't thought about that in a long time. So yeah, I was really mad that day. But back to your ROE question. So those guys that were in this fight in Basra were pinned down just outside of cities. So there's these buildings, these 2- and 3-story buildings where they're getting lit up, heavy machine guns and small arms. And they've got 2 Navy F-18s on station. The ROE was they couldn't go below, I can't remember if it was 5,000 or 10 at the time. I don't even remember anymore, but I know it was too high for them to, they could do a gun run and pull off. I think it was 5, because you could do a gun run and pull off and not touch the min out at 5,000. But the problem was these dudes were in the 2nd story of a 3-story building. So they were protected from plunging fire if they were coming in on a 15, 20, or 30 degree dive. So, and it was getting serious. Our guys were behind a cinder block wall. They found out later on the reason they were getting so lit up is because the fax antenna was sticking up behind the wall. So these fuckers in the building were locking in on that antenna and just hammering down. So it was coming down to, we're all going to die, basically, not to exaggerate it in the slightest. And the guy, Tim Blithedale, who is also now a Delta pilot, was the FAC on station. And he got a hold of the Navy section lead and said, dude, the rounds are ineffective. And he's like, okay, stand by. The next thing he knows is he hears in from the south, and he turns over, and this Navy Hornet is about 300 feet off the ground. And he says, wings level, and they go, cleared hot. And he hammers down from about a mile out with 20 millimeter and kicked in the rudder to just annihilate this building and take out everything. Pulled off, popped the flares. He was out, saved my entire, it's a little bit different nomenclature with angle codes. So firepower control team, and then the supporting arms liaison team. About a squad size, about 12 to 15 guys. He saved everybody's life that day. We didn't have a single casualty other than Mr. Eardrums, who the staff sergeant felt was important enough to wake his parents in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's all right, keep going back. And so ROE, this guy went back to the ship, landed, and was grounded. They grounded him for breaking the ROE with the altitude restrictions. Again, Dodo, I don't get pissed off. I have what we call personality failures. I no longer maintain my ability to have a personality and lost my shit. And the phone calls, my CO was like, hey man, you can take a break. And I was like, oh, this is really So I had told that story to a couple of people, just a couple, probably the entire Marine Corps. And then subsequently during Tailhook, when Tailhook's going on, they run a symposium with the Navy and the Marine Corps, a whole bunch of aviation. One of them is the air to ground, I don't even remember what they called it. It's air to ground committee, forum, a symposium. And my old boss from the Red Devil days, he's like, Doug, you got to come to Tailhook and talk at this symposium. I had just come back. This was Tailhook 2008. So I'd only been home for a month and a half. I was still very angry. And so I, in front of this, 500 person group with CNAF there, the 3-star for the Naval Aviation, the Deputy Commandant of Marine Aviation, another 3-star, and a whole bunch of these other people got asked a question about ROE, and I told them. And I led off with, I didn't know who the pilot was, and I said, I don't know who he is, but you can tell him if he ever looks me up, he will never buy a drink the rest of his life. Because if it wasn't for him and disobeying this bullshit, backwards, cover your ass ROE, all of my Marines would be dead. So you can take that for what it's worth. I'm not trying to point fingers at everybody, except anybody that may have had anything to do with that ROE. And luckily, everybody took it in the, okay, he's just very angry. And CNAF gave me one of his coins and said, hey, thanks for telling us that story. And long answer to your question, but a lot of those are cover your ass. I don't want to lose an aircraft, ROE. Then you go into a second level, which I do understand, which is collateral damage. I was not allowed to drop in Iraq a couple of times because we had no idea what was in the building next door. It could, and I guarantee you hit something and it has frag and goes into a hospital. That's going to be what shows up on CNN, not the fact that you took out 3 bad guys and saved the platoon. So I get it. But in this situation and in numerous other situations where you have these low collateral damage weapons, like the gun, like, 500 pounder with delayed fusing, you have options that we were not allowed to do because of the restrictiveness of the ROE. So I'll take a breath now. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's perfectly fine. We enjoy hearing the stories.
Hey Justin, if I may, like a lot of us, we only play the DCS, so we only see the damage results. But like a simple 500-pound like GBU 38 or Mark 82, like using something we all know like a residential neighborhood, if you drop that on a house, how many subsequent houses next door is that going to take out roughly or cause damage to?
A 500-pounder with regular housing, you're not talking concrete structures, stuff like that, will take out an entire block, or at least have effects where, the shock wave alone will do a crazy amount of damage.
I'd like to.
Here we go.
Hold
on 1 second, guys. I got to yell at my son. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. Oh,
Am I back with you? Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, we have you back.
Okay. The 500-pounder, the shock wave itself will take out, I would estimate about a block. It's more, with, I couldn't give you exact dimensions on it. There's actual Pac-Man, hey, within this radius, you're going to have this much damage or that, but a 500-pounder will do plenty. And then you can, if you airburst that, it's even more. But the minute you start adding in concrete, you start adding in steel, well, now you're talking about it going into a building and blowing out that building by itself. But houses, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near something when a 500-pounder went off.
I was just going to say, so 7 pounds of C4 that we used to breach a wall one time, it broke a light pole over, and every house within the area, like I'd never forget, I walked in the first house and all the faucets were just running. The ceiling tiles were out, the windows blown out, the furniture discombobulated, no one to be found. The shock wave, I think, gets lost on a lot of people when they don't understand, like, your house is fragile, where you stand is fragile. It might not do a DCS blowout where it's just a kind of a crumble and black smoke and fire, but yeah, it's going to rearrange everything for a city block at least.
Yeah, it is a significant amount. Guys, I'm going to try to move outside here really quick because we're about to have the food delivered, so my son's going to have to deal with that while we're doing that. I apologize while I'm doing this while you guys are recording. Hold on 1 second.
That's quite all right.
Kid sports is going to be the death of me, where I'm going to have all these other things taken care of, and it's going to be kid sports that drives me to my grave.
Yep. That's how it goes.
Well, I go to kids sports. Leave me alone.
Me too. I know, that's my problem. All right, you guys hear me okay out here?
Yep, perfectly fine.
Okay.
All right, so
if we lose anything, I'll go back inside.
Moving on to another question. What was the funniest thing you've seen a fellow aviator or pilot get hazed for?
Oh, God. Okay, well, there's a couple of, I guess, oh, man. The list is long. One of the ones that I remember, the first one comes to my head. We had a guy, his name is John Moss. His call sign was Fungus, for "fuck you, new guy, you suck." And that was hazing enough alone. But before he got that call sign, General Imes, Wolfie Imes, he had been the XO of the Red Devils and was now the CO of a squadron called the Bats that was in the hangar next door. And we were getting John Moss checking in, brand new F-18 Cat 1s, what we call them, new join.
Was this over in was this in Beaufort?
No, this is, I'm a captain at this point. This is Red Devils. This is 2004 time frame. And so he comes over to the squadron in his alphas, comes upstairs, And the duty says, "Oh, you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be at 242, not 232." He's like, "But my orders say 2." No, you got to go over there. So they had called Wolfie ahead of time and said, "Hey, we're sending you a new guy. Will you make him just harass him?" So, and everybody's in the ready room watching. So here he comes over in Alphas, comes out. We had a big window that looked out over the flight line between the two hangars. And there he goes in his Alphas walking down, between the two hangars. But just, so he goes over to the other hangar, goes up, reports to the commanding officer, and Wolfie says, "Hey, John, I know you're real excited, but, we're, the 242 is a Delta squadron, so we have pilots and Wizzos. And 232, who you had orders to, they're full right now. So unfortunately, I'm full on pilots too. So what we're going to do is we're going to send you back to the training command for just 3 months, 3 quick months. We're going to train you up to be a Wizzo in the back seat, and you're going to deploy with us to Iraq as a navigator. And I know you're excited. I know you want to, be part of the team and come over with us." And the look on John's face from what Wolfie is talking about when we were all at the club later, he's like, just ghost white, like, "What? I'm going to do what?" And he went, he's like, "So do you need anything? Do you think you'll be able to do that?" And he's like, "Sure, whatever the Marine Corps needs." And he goes, "Get the fuck out of here. Your squadron's over there waiting for you, dumbass." And he sent him out. So that was one good one. We would always change the radio frequencies all the time before we couldn't do that anymore. So you would call up base, and you would think you were calling the ground, and you'd be talking to base, and everybody in the radio room, "Oh yeah, Devil, go ahead and taxi up your ass." So silly reindeer game.
That's funny.
Yeah.
This one I don't think necessarily applied to you unless I'm mistaken. Question is, what qualities do you feel differentiate good Hornet weapon system officers? I guess in probably some context, if I remember, you never flew the D model. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I did fly with some when I was a group augment, but I would say probably, I think I had somebody behind me about 3 or 4 flights out of my entire career. So it's hard to say. I will say that the Wizzos that I got on the most with were normal dudes who understand that they were a performance expander. They weren't trying to be a pilot. They were trying to kill bad guys and to enhance the ability of the pilot to fly the aircraft and employ the aircraft while they were working the sensors, the clearances, the radios. You really could have a force multiplier if you had a crew that was trained well enough to establish roles and get through, especially when it came to forward air controlling airborne. I could never do in a single seat what those guys were able to do for that type of mission. So I'm not a Wizzo hater, but I did like I'm glad I wasn't in the family model. I do like the season A's. But the other thing too that's hard from a squadron perspective, if you think about it, single seat squadron, you got 17 to 21 dudes, and that's it. In a ready room in a 2-seat squadron, you're talking 30, 40 dudes, and it's all type A, and then sometimes the Wizzos can get a little type B, but it's just that many more personalities that are impacting the collective that really makes it complicated. And I never had to deal with that being in a single seat squadron, and I loved it. I did Black Knights, Red Devils, and Silver Eagles, and the ready rooms were all very, very, very similar. If you went to some of the other 2-seat squadron ready rooms, a lot different atmosphere.
The segueing into a little bit of the Navy and Marine separation. In our last conversation, you talked about a little bit about FCLPs. Could you talk a little bit about how they, I guess, scheduling wise for FCLPs between the Navy and the Marine squadrons? How difficult was it to be able to schedule that between both branches to get out to the carrier, to do those traps and get the qualifications?
So yeah, so first the FCLPs, those are at the field. Those are the workup sessions to get you ready to go to the boat. When you
Yep.
actually go to the boat, they call it TQ. So for the FCLPs at the field, there's no problems. Miramar had a lens and a box painted on a 2-4 left, and El Centro had one, and San Clemente had one out on the island. So we had all the time in the world to just do left-hand turns and bounce all the time. That was never an issue. The CQ is also never an issue because you're part of the air wing. It wasn't like you're just getting, hey, we're going to get 232 out today from the Marines, and then tomorrow we're going to get PFA 41. It wasn't like that. It was Carrier Air Wing 11 is CQing on the Nimitz on these dates. And Carrier Air Wing 11 is doing Comp 2X or Fleet X or blanking on some of the other names of the exercises during those times. So the entire effort of the United States Navy goes into this carrier's in this position at this time, and it's taking the air wing aboard for training on these times. So it was never a problem.
Going into or segueing back over towards some of your FAC work, when you were getting a 9 line, how much information did you want as a, or excuse me, actually, I'm sorry, I take it back to your air to ground days. When you're getting a 9 line, how much information do you want as opposed to what's taught to be given during those operations?
If you've got time, give it all, because it's all situational awareness enhancing. But when it comes down to how bad things are, it's lines 4 and 6. That you need lines 4 and 6, and then friendlies with a distance and direction. You never wanted to know the exact position of the friendlies, because then you're just opening up Pandora's box to accidentally put in a coordinate that was not where you wanted to be, which is what happened with the Canadians all those years ago. But so yeah, 4 and 6 were the big ones. And then it became also munitions. There was all kinds of different levels of, hey, this is all going on, we're taking fire. When we I think the closest I ever got where guys were like, hey, it's on, you could hear the 50 cals going off in the background. We were supporting Dutch special forces, and they were close enough that we could only do. We still did GBU-12, so they were able to take cover for the GBU-12, but then we finished up with 20 millimeter, and it's fast. So we had lines 4 and 6. We had an attack direction, and that was it. And we rolled in. They wanted it type 1 so they could see us and see the target, and that's what we had, and it was fine. But yeah, minimum information, lines 4 and 6.
Sorry, going through and reading some of them that we can hit on. Let's see. I'm not sure I can. Let me try to see if I can rephrase it. Comms on carrier deck. Obviously, hand signals for captains and handlers, but what is being said on radios during startup taxi, on the CAT, and of course landings?
So if you're Cat 1 during the daytime, there is no comm. There's nothing, and that was the beauty of Cat. I'm talking landing and taking off. It is completely silent unless there was a problem. And then 9 times out of 10, you're coming up on another frequency or a tower. Can I get a rep? Was, I think, the only time you heard anything on button 1 for tower. And then you were gone. Cat case 3, case 2, now there's more comm. You're talking on approach. You're going from strike to approach frequencies. But you're never talking to anybody on the ground. Nobody's talking to you about taxiing. It is purely looking at the yellow shirts and doing exactly what they're telling you to do. They're bringing you up to the CAT. They're telling you to put the launch bar down. They're telling you to go into tension. You're giving them the salute. Daytime, nighttime is turning on all your lights. And it is calm out. Pretty crazy, isn't it? All that, it always used to blow my mind. And daytime for the recovery, the way you knew when to come down out of the stack during the daytime is you were counting the launches. You knew the next vol was going out, and they had 8 airplanes to launch. And right about the time they were launching the 7th airplane, those next 2 guys were coming out of their 2,000-foot stack, out of their 3,000-foot stack, to then come in for the break. And you just tried to time it so that when you were launching off that A airplane, you were in the break. And then 45 seconds later, they had the rubber tracks and the cats, and they were opening up the flight deck, and you were landing right when the deck opened. They used to call it pushing the deck. You really wanted to try to make the deck work efficiently enough so that there was only a few seconds between the cats being covered up and the airplanes coming in.
Wow.
Hey, Dodo, carrier like coming in, was there ever a time if you were like the lead section or whatnot, that if there was no departures happening, you would just come in straight in, to the 800 foot, 350 knot, and just go right in your break and skip the Marshall stack?
Oh yeah, those were fun. I got launched on actually it was no, that one I had ordnance on board. I was gonna say, wait, I had to go take an Iranian P3, got too close to the boat, so I got to do like a launch the Alert 15 airplane. It was like right out of the Battle of Britain. It was awesome. But like I was out. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Could you maybe go through that story? It's a great story that you told us in our last session, and I think everybody would love to hear the whole story on that.
I'll tell that one, and then just to answer the first question is, yeah. So if you're out there on your own, I mean, that was the time you brought the heat, and you could come in. I mean, I think the fastest I ever got was about 620, 630 at 800 feet, and you're turning before you reach the back of the ship, and then you're pulling for everything you got, trying to get slow enough to drop the gear. It was a lot of fun. I really do. That's the only thing I miss about landing on the boat is being able to do that.
Is that where you see like those Instagram videos where like someone filming on the deck, like somebody with a crew sees someone coming in, literally breaking the sound barrier as they go past the boat where you can see?
No, they would do flybys. Those were flybys. Those were like air days where they would do like an air show for the boat. Those are the ones when you're seeing those passes.
Like a morale builder or something.
Yeah. You would know if it was a guy coming in for the shit hot, is what they called it, is if the camera was on the platform and it's looking back and you see the guy go into the break before he even gets to the ship. And then you just hear that sound, and guys will blow this all the time. The Hornet sound, and it's caused by the interruption of the airflow into the intakes, and it's called the Hornet hum, and it's just this when you get over a certain number. It's not the sound barrier, but somewhere around 450-ish, whatever, you'll start to hear that. And the faster you go, the louder it goes. And what a lot of guys do, they're like, oh, I'm coming in, and they throw the afterburners in when they break, and it's just loud. That's just noise. When you get that bullet sounding, that was bringing the throttles all the way back to idle, so it wasn't the afterburners making all the noise. And that disruption of the airflow just gives it this bullet sound. You'll hear it online at some of the high speed, we got past.
I thought it was audio. I thought that was audio, like people playing with audio to overlay on that. Wow,
yeah,
that's a thing.
It sounds like a bullet. It's the best. And the amateurs would go into Afterburner to talk about the amateur hour. No, you need to be press will bring it out of Afterburner and then let it sound, because it's all about you, right? It's how you look. But so the Iranian guy, they had intel that they were going to launch and come too close to the ship, so we had 2 F-18s on standby, and I want to say it was Alert 15. So that meant you're in your flight gear, airplanes on ship power on the flight deck. And it was, you get a call in the ready room over the 1MC, just like in the movies, launch the Alert 15 aircraft, bogey bearing, da 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 da. And it was so, like, we knew it was coming, but it was so cool. Like, you're just sitting there and you're running down, and everybody's like, go get him, Dodo, and like jump up to the flight deck, and you put it in there, and you're hot, man. You got AMRAAMs, you got heaters, you got whatever you need, man. And and then off to the cat you go. My wingman goes down he had a INS problem, and so I go up to the cat, And boom, there I go as a raging single out in the Arabian Gulf after this guy. And I'm getting vectors on the approach frequency where he is, and my radar dies. And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, not today. And but I was able to get. We had just gotten the 9Xs, and the AIM 9X is an incredible 4-quarter capability. And I was able to get an IR lock on him, and with the helmet mounted sight, I could see where he was even without a radar lock, and was able to come in and stern convert on him and join on him to then tell him he needs to not be anywhere near the ship. And then my wingman came up and he's like, "Oh, dude, this is so cool. I got to get a picture of you." Look at these. And then you can see guys in the windows, like looking out there and, you know, keeping up the whole foreign relations thing. That's like Top Gun. Yeah, it's real. And, you know, then you got to make your standard calls. Hey, you're too close. Get out of here. I hate to have to do anything silly. But yeah, that was my only air-to-air intercept my entire career. So that was neat.
As part of that, could you talk maybe a little bit about some of the maybe funny incidents you mentioned to us in the previous one of pilots when they were coming back to the boat with ordnance on, and the statement you're supposed to say if a certain event happens? I'll leave it from there when you're coming down to trap.
Oh, you're gonna have to help me out. Which one are we talking about?
Certain things coming off the rail at undesirable times coming back to the boat, either in the break or coming down on deck, losing ordnance.
Oh yes, yeah. You got it right. Yeah. If you landed and something came off, you had to call the shot, and then it was oh hey. So if you had a harm missile come off and you called Magnum, it was supposed to be like a keg of beer. Nobody ever did it because by that time you're like, what the hell just happened? But yeah, if you had something come off, it was if you called the shot, then there was no harm, no foul.
All right, so let's see, another question. Looking back at this is kind of in general, looking back at your military career and knowing what you know now, what aircraft would you have liked to have flown?
I'm a Hornet Mafia guy. I loved flying that airplane. I mean, if there would have been an opportunity to fly a Raptor because it's not even fair anymore when you have the Raptor capability with the vector thrust and everything. It's not even fair. So that would have been neat to actually see what that could do. But as far as a non-vectored thrust, knife fighter in a phone booth, you talk to F-16 guys and say, oh yeah, well that's whatever. No, there's nothing 1v1 that can beat the Hornet if it's flown correctly. It's amazing and eye-watering what that airplane can do. Swapping ends, slowing down, still able to point your nose at people, and with helmet-mounted sight, it was a blast. I'm really happy that I got to do that for as long as I did. My favorite looking jet is the Phantom. I would have loved to have flown the Phantom because I think it's the meanest looking airplane they've ever built. But the performance it's not even remarkable compared to, the avionics and the weapon systems and all the other stuff you have in a Hornet that it doesn't have. But that would have been neat to fly. Or you can go another route and say, I would have loved to fly the A6 and drop a stick of 24 Mark 82s. That would have been pretty cool to say you did.
Yeah, well, apparently, so hopefully in another year they're actually going to come out with the A6 model for the Intruder, and that would be nice to go and try.
Yeah.
in this game. I actually have a side question in terms of the JHIPMIS system. I guess how difficult was it getting used to it when it was introduced to your squadron? With the off balance weight and pulling G's, how difficult was that getting used to?
It's hard. The off balance weight is a pain in the ass, man. Your neck is sore after that stuff, and especially for long periods of time. I loved the capability. I hated the dark helmet, stupid look of it. But it was when they figured that out, some other way to do it. It's just, you can't, the SA in the air to ground environment, in the air to air environment, just being able to look out and see it. It's disorienting at first because you do have the heads up display information in there, And that you kind of need some sort of a reference to look forward if you're getting disoriented to then maneuver the airplane. But if you're in a fight and you're able to look over your shoulder and employ the weapon systems of the airplane when you're in an acceptability region for the missiles or whatever you have, having that up there and not having to look back in the HUD, it's amazing. And then let alone the tallies, visual, being able to look outside and see where the airplane is to get a pickup of a bogey to then declare them hostile. It's you can't put a price tag on what that capability gave to you. Daytime only, obviously, but it was unbelievable capability.
Another question was, in terms of the training that you received through the Hornet, how much of it has been really applicable to your civilian career?
I think it's more along the lines of your ability to manage problems. The situations are significantly different. Most significant is if I had a problem in the F-18 or I had an error or something that needed to be fixed, it took 2 seconds to just move the stick and move the airplane to whatever altitude or position I needed it to be in. In a commercial airliner, you do that, you're going to hurt people or you're going to scare a lot of people. So you have to think, like, instead of reacting and thinking quickly, you have to think way down road, an hour out, 30 minutes out, what you're going to be doing coming in. And that, I don't want to say it complicates the problem. It's just a different mindset, a different thinking. It's not going to be like, hey, I'm coming over here and, oh, hey, that just changed. Okay, well, let's go over here. No, you're thinking long range, and then, fuel and position and losing the altitude, slowing down without hurting people in the back. It just is a different set of problems versus, okay, on the ship, hey, I got this much fuel, I got to make it this much time, I got to be over here. But then it's just happening, and it's moving like that versus, okay, 3 hours from now, I need to do, it's just that it was an easier plan to execute. But I think what prepares you from one to the other is just the dynamic nature of it. Close air support, landing on an aircraft carrier, fuel planning, collateral damage, distances to guys on the ground, troops you're supporting. Okay, that trains you to have an aviation mindset in this region. And then you go over the commercial region and you're like, okay, I've been given this plane for maintenance. Where am I going? Is this really what plane I want to fly with 200 people on board? Do I have enough fuel? Is the weather going to be a factor? Instead of bad guys shooting at you, have thunderstorms going after you, stuff like that. So there's a lot of similarities, but the way to handle the problem is significantly different with the timeline. Way downrange. That took a lot getting used to. And then having a crew member that you're running a backup forth on, especially as a brand new FO, and now you're not in charge of a squadron anymore. You're answering to a captain in the left seat. And it's just dynamic. But I think the mindset from Marine aviation and aviation, I felt like it was phenomenal being able to go in there, because you've been treated, if you're a brand new guy to the squadron, you're the new guy, man. Shut the fuck up and call it. He's like, you need to learn. And we all go in there, you sit in the right seat and you listen to what the captain's saying, and you learn as much as you can and aviate, navigate, communicate, all the stuff that the basics of aviation. And I felt very prepared. It was overwhelming. The first time I ever flew with a co-pilot or captain and first officer was landing a 717 in Birmingham, Alabama. And it was just, even though you've been in the simulator, you've done all that, there's 90 people on there that have no idea this is the first time you've landed in an airplane as a civilian, pilot with an airliner, and it was cool.
Are you still in the 717 there, Justin?
No, I moved up to 757s and 67s in 2018. And then just in January, since I spoke to you guys, I just moved over to captain. So I'm captain on the 7.6 and 7.5s now.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we're doing a lot of those T2 2037 mods up here at MSB right now.
Oh yeah, right on, man.
Yep.
I love the 717. My plan was to stay on it and just move from the right seat to the left seat on that airplane. That was some great, short leg flying West Coast, no red eyes. But then they took the airplane out of LAX and they're all consolidated in Detroit and Atlanta now. And I got spoiled not commuting. It's too easy to just drive up to LA or John Wayne and fly from there versus flying somewhere to then go to work.
So,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
big.
was it like a huge difference for you, knowing that you've got like 100 or 200 souls like sitting behind you that you're like pretty much responsible for?
100%. Yeah, and that's back to the mindset thing. You know, it's similar in that instead of protecting guys on the ground or other wingmen, you're now, quote unquote protecting or keeping people safe behind you. But it's a difference where like every action you take, every movement of the controls, every decision you're making, it's directly affecting the people because they're on the airplane with you, and that mindset is significantly. It's not overwhelming. It's just a tremendous amount of responsibility that I always take. I don't take lightly, and enjoy the ability to do what I do to make sure people get to where they want to go. The flying's not the same. Anybody who's telling you that whole story with the guy, hey, I just got up and got a cup of coffee. Do that, fighter guy. Yeah, that guy never flew fighters. I would do it. They wouldn't even have to pay me to go do it right now. But I do love the opportunities I have. Like we were talking about coaching. I never had a chance to coach when I was active duty. You didn't know if you're going to be home for dinner, let alone for a Saturday. So being able to have a set schedule and, make time for, coaching football and baseball and stuff, the benefits that I get from the job outweigh the professional satisfaction of, bending an F-18 around at 7.5 Gs.
Well, Justin, if you're ever laid over up at MSP, Jax can put you in touch with me. I'll give you a tour of our Tech Ops test cell.
Dude, I'd love it. That would be phenomenal. Yeah, some of those, I get those short MSP layovers where we're actually in the what is that, the Radisson? I can't remember the name of the hotel that's part of the airport. But that would be awesome. Or I think it's the Intercontinental. Yeah.
Side question in terms of armament. When our last conversation we talked about the type of ordnance that you carry. Could you maybe kind of cover that on like what you would typically fly for air-to-air, air-to-ground missions?
Yeah. The ones we did in Afghanistan and Iraq in 2007, which my last one, we had 2 fuel tanks for the gas, and we had a GBU-12, GBU-38 Maverick, and then we had AIM-9s, and then with the low air-to-air threat, that was probably all we went out with. I don't think I carried an AIM-RAM at all. I don't remember doing that. So yeah, they gave you a ton of options, and then 500 rounds of the gun. That was a great loadout for that type of environment. Now, at the beginning of the war, when they were taking out convoys and stuff like that, I mean, you had 6 Mark 83s and CBU-99 cluster bombs and stuff like that. If you were going after revetted threats or concrete bunkers, you had all the way up to GBU-24s, with some penetrating capability. Actually, I left one out. The GBU-38 and the GBU-12, GPS and the LGB on every flight, and it just gave you could do anything. Guy had a laser to market. If all he had was the ability to do mensurated coordinates, you could do that. If it was a collateral damage issue, you could do the gun, and that was great. Now, sometimes depending on what you could bring back, and every time you add something onto the airplane, if you don't drop it, that's poundage that you got to come back to the boat, and you had to be under 34,000 pounds to land on the ship. The more armament you're putting on, the less fuel you have to take 1 or 2 looks at the ship before you have to go to the tanker. And then if you're in blue water, you only get 2 looks. What if the tanker didn't work and stuff like that? You're really complicating the problem. So a lot of the times you would only go out with 1 GBU-12 or 2
cut back on, one, I'm trying to think of something else that we would have cut back on. Maverick, I think we would have taken out and just gone with I think we always had a GPS and an LGB, if I remember correctly.
I got a question. This is kind of comes from Turbine here. He asked me to ask you about well, actually, you already asked a question about the landing and calling a Magnum if you knew you dropped a Magnum and all that. But he also asked me to, when I watched that PBS documentary, it was kind of disheartening seeing the Marine Corps be called out a little bit, even by the enlisted, of having these older aircraft. And he said you have a story that some aircraft couldn't even come back to the ship because they had met their trap limit.
Yeah.
Just too much stress.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
my question is how much stress, like how many or traps are you supposed to have? How much will they let you go past that? And then you said there's a limit of 34,000 pounds. Is there like a scale they got to how many pounds or thousands of pounds over? Like, does that reduce the trap limit of that plane? I mean, how's that go?
Yeah, it's all. I mean, and I don't have the exact number. And with all the modifications and center barrel replacements and landing gear replacements, I can't remember what the number is, but there is a number that was non-waiverable. And when the airplane had that many landings, it was no longer allowed to go to the ship. So that's just for the safety of the airplane and the crew and what you're carrying. The 34,000 pound mark was that's a hard limit. That's a NATOPS limit. That if you go over that, you are going to overstress the airframe. You're going to overstress the landing gear. Just that amount of it's just physics and weight and force, and you can't take it, can't handle it. But that gear, the landing gear and the wings and the center barrels and everything are strong enough that at 34,000 pounds and less, it can take a pretty significant hard landing and not break. And that's why they have that limit on there. It was whatever statistics showed them that above 34,000 pounds, you were risking structural failure, structural damage. That's where they made that limit. But yeah, even in the Super Hornets now, the Navy's Super Hornets and even the F-35, I mean, there is a trap limit. And when they hit that number, they're no longer allowed to go to the ship.
And if there's ever whatever kind of emergency situation where you can't dump fuel in time, you can't, even add more. If for whatever reason you're above 34,000, does that kind of put the plane back into hey, we got to go look at this thing on a deeper level to make sure that we can put it back on the list?
Yeah, I think, there were all kinds of situations that could come up. And obviously they're not going to make a guy land in the ocean, but they would probably, if there was a situation, they would probably have him burned down. It would have to be a very significant, like you're on fire and you've got to land above 34,000. They would have you dump fuel. They would have you burn fuel, fly around longer before coming in to get over that. But as far as the maintenance goes, big complaints for I think, misunderstood complaints for the Marine Corps back during that series was, yeah, they're older airplanes, but the Navy had older airplanes too. The VFA 94 on that cruise, they had older airplanes than we did. But the thing is that, it's the Marine maintenance on a ship, that squadron, that maintenance department had never been on an aircraft carrier before. We only had onesies and twosies of people that had that boat experience. Doing maintenance at sea is significantly different than doing maintenance ashore. And how you operate with
How is that?
parts
Because
department.
I remember seeing in the PBS documentary that
Yeah.
Salsa Wog, if you remember that,
Yeah.
yeah, he said he was a little pissed off.
Randy.
Yeah, he looked like he seemed like a really good guy.
He was a good dude. He gets pretty fired up and kind of misdirected anger a lot of the time, but great dude. He was a power liner. He was an engine guy.
But I could see it in his eyes when he said, he goes, the Navy thinks we suck. He goes, this is our first cruise, and I never really understood what he was talking about. Must be just.
So Randy's the thing that I always kind of, we were good friends, but the thing is, and it was a matter of the mindset going into that. You had a lot of Marines, including Randy, that I'm just kind of going all over the place. My best quote from my first squadron CO is if you have to walk into a bar and tell everybody how cool you are, you're not that cool.
and you had a lot of Marines. We're the Marine Corps, man. We're you should know that you're the elite. Being a Marine, whether Marine aviation, Marine maintenance, whatever, you're it. But if you got to walk around and tell everybody you are, how do you think they're going to react? And it's the Navy's home. It's their ship. We are part of the air wing, but like it or not like it, we are guests. We are the Navy's Marine Corps. Okay. And if you take it in any other mindset, let your actions do the speaking for you. We have the best maintenance, or we have the best pilots, whatever, because the grades show it that way. The engagements that we protected people show it that way. Let that talk for itself.
Well, and we had to
when
do
you
that
go
in
in-
Kandahar when we had to out hump the Army every day. If they
Yeah.
hump 6 miles, we
So-
hump 7.
Yeah. But you go in and you have that conflict, they're not going to help you. Why would they? Why would you help somebody if they're coming in there telling you, hey, Navy, we're the Marine Corps, whatever. Well, yeah, you know what? And this was Randy. Yeah, we do suck. We were not good because we're new. But if we had gone in, a lot of us, including leadership, had gone in and said, hey, guys, we're here. It's our first time. Teach us. Bring us in part of the family. We know we're the redheaded stepchildren, but that's because you guys don't want to be us. I totally get it. Bring us in, teach us, make us better. And then that would have totally changed things around. And the second cruise we went on in 2007, complete 180 degrees from the 2005 cruise, because Hamster Hobson was our CO. He had more F-18 landings on a Navy aircraft carrier than any other Marine in history. But he understood Navy operations. And you let your actions speak for you why you're the best of the best, and claim that you're a Marine and all that goes with it. But if you go around and you tell everybody, hey, I know I'm in your house, but I'm the best. Okay, we'll see if the handler moves that airplane so you can do a high power turn on the flight deck. Oh, really? You need to do that engine? Why would I help you? You're the one that's telling me that you're better than me. And I know it sounds silly and like backyard junior high school stuff, but it's respect. It's mutual respect. If you don't respect the people that you're living with, why would they help you?
That brings up a good side question we talked about before, was kind of the separation between the Navy and the Marines. When you're sitting on the boat, you're part of basically the Navy, and then of course when you start going on board or on shore and operating, you're part of the Marine Corps detachments. Can you kind of go into some of that detail about what it was like having to deal with the orders between both sides?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes to anybody that's been in a joint task force. It's hard. It's complicated. It's all about whose rice bowl is what, and we experienced that it's frustrating. So 2005. Well, anytime you're attached to a Navy Air Wing, you're part of you're supporting the Combined Air Operations Center, which is, that's controlling all the air that's going to here. The Marine Corps, the MAGTAP, you have Marine Ground, Marine Air Traffic Control. Everybody's in that MAGTAP. Now you bring in the Navy and they have other supporting elements that come in, but that's the MAGTAP. When you are brought out and put into a Navy Air Wing, my squadron is a Navy asset that's part of the chaos. We're plugged into the air operations order. We're sent to where we want to go. There is no guarantee that you're going to be supporting Marines at all. That's frustrating as a Marine because you want to be doing that, but we also understand the bigger picture, just like being a ground joint task force. You might be a Marine infantry platoon, but now you're falling in with, this Army unit because you guys are guarding this base and you are artillery guys, but now you're, 0302 acting grunts, and you're providing security for this base, and the Army is in charge. It's just the way it is. I mean, that's the joint mentality. So I always looked at it that way when it came to the Navy operations. A lot of guys never got through that, and they, hated the Navy, or they didn't want to be like the Navy, or they didn't, understand what we were doing there. And that was frustrating because it's just like if you were at an Army base as a Marine detachment, if you don't at least show some sort of mutual customs and courtesies, yeah, you can be the Marine Corps, you can be the best. If you go around telling everybody that, your life's going to be miserable.
Well, it's just, there's the healthy side of inner branch competition.
Yes, absolutely.
And then there's the unhealthy side. And the unhealthy side is when you won't work with someone because they're
That's
this
right.
or they're that. And that's even within the Marine Corps. We have the old pogues and the grunts, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
I got a
Justin.
funny question real quick for you. Watching that PBS documentary, has it occurred to any of you that your nugget female flyer on there looks like a young Sigourney Weaver?
Yeah, Cone. Yeah, I've seen she had been. Yeah, yep, I agree. Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, I flew combat with her. We did combined squadron operations. I flew missions in Iraq with her.
Yeah, she seems super locked on, and then you had the other one that looks like if she could crack walnuts with the back of her knees. I would fuck with her at a bar.
It's the handler. She's the handler. She was awesome too. That girl would outdrink any of us.
Sorry, going through our list. I think this applies back to the D. How much flight training do SNFOs receive before they hop in the back seat? I don't think that applies. I could be wrong.
No, well, the training command in Miramar did pilots and NFOs, and the
Okay.
syllabus I can't remember. I know it was shorter. I just couldn't be able to tell you how much shorter. And they were the same kind of flights. You know, you did air to ground, circle the wagons, then you did air to ground with live ordnance. You did air interdiction. You did all weather intercepts. You did the whole low levels, and it was a set syllabus of wickets that you had to jump through to then go to the squadron. But I can't remember. I just remember it being shorter, like at least a couple of months.
I guess going along that line, could you maybe, in short summary, kind of go over what would be covered in the course of the full flight syllabus? From our perspective, we have phases that we go through for our pilots that basically start from the basics and they progressively get harder until we call them what we call FMQ. So, but that's based on our syllabus, of course, is we try to mimic as real close as we can to what you guys do.
Yeah, no, and the syllabus has changed all the time. I don't even know what the nomenclature is now, but that's pretty full mission capable. FMC was what we called it, and if you were FM, you was air to air, air to ground, and CQ. Those were and they had all the different phases in there. Air to air started out with 1v1s, 2v2s, multiplane, and then you went into large force exercise stuff where you're doing divisions against divisions and missions, 12 airplanes versus an unknown number of airplanes, and then you start over on the air to ground side. And you start out with dropping bombs and strafing, and then you were doing section attacks, and then you were doing low altitude, high altitude, medium altitude attacks. And then you were combining the two and doing air interdiction, where you're fighting your way in, dropping your ordnance, fighting your way back out, and then you're taking it to I'm trying to think of what else, low altitude tactics. And then you have the section of close air support, and then you have high threat, low threat, medium threat, close air support. So it was all kind of I know probably every profession you have, crawl, walk, run, but it all started out, usually on your own as a single, and then it was a section, then it was a division, and then you start over again, and you're a single again, you're a section, and then a division, and you just went all the way up, and then eventually you got to large force exercise stuff, where you were, having guys go. You had fighter elements, you had attack elements, you had electronic warfare elements, you had airborne early warning, you had all that stuff. So if you guys are running syllabuses like that, where I want to say junior level because it all mattered. You can't fly the airplane by yourself. You're never going to be able to incorporate into a section or division as an effective, combat employment weapon. But you got to start it there to learn how to fly the airplane and learn how to employ, so that when your attention is divided between not only employing my weapon, but making sure I don't hit the guy next to me, or as a section lead, employing my weapon, leading my section into the fight, knowing where my wingman is, knowing where the other flights are. continues to build until you're done. And then the upper level, you know, get into the instructor qualifications. Now you're taught how to teach, and then the like Top Gun instructors or MOT weapons and tactics instructors. Now you're going in the upper level stuff of how to teach tactics and why we're doing these. I don't even know what they're even doing, fighter tactics or whatever the name is that they're doing for how to engage air to air at range with the weapons that we have available to us.
That actually breaks off into a good question that somebody posted. I heard somewhere that flight instructors are usually people who just graduated flight school. Is this correct? And if so, if so, was there ever a disconnect between the younger and older instructors?
So for the orange and white airplanes, the you know, jets and T-45s, and then the T-45s, T-45s and I'm blanking on what the twin engine one for the
T-38
that they learn on. No, it's the props. It was the C-12 is what the attachment version is, but I think it's called the T-44. I can't remember. But anyway, my point is that you have what's called surgrads. So they are winged aviators, and then they stay before going to learn F-18s or Harriers or something, and they're trained to teach people how to fly jets. That is a very basic airmanship level qual, like teaching guys how to fly jets, period. And that's it. And somebody who's just gone through the syllabus, if they were skilled enough or there was no flight training squadron to go to, there was a backlog or something, then they could make them surgrads and make them instructors. At the fleet, when you're selected to be an instructor, you know, the first instructor qual most guys get, which is arguably one of the hardest, is ACTI, Air Combat Tactics Instructor. And then once you go through that, then there's all kinds of other ones: low altitude tactics instructor, night systems instructor. I think of some of the other ones we have, but the ACTI, that was the big, you know, you're studying 18 hours a day, learning all the TAC manuals for the weapon systems, how to employ, and then how to teach, how to brief. Because as the ACTI, you're taking out that brand new guy and saying, we know what you were taught in the training command, we know what you were taught in the RAG, but here's what else you need to know when you're actually having people shoot at you. And that's the level that you do to that. So I think the answer to that question would be the orange and white stuff. Yeah, they're new guys, but the tactics instructors in the fleet, those are guys that are selected to have the skill to do it.
Hey, Dodo,
Go
real
ahead.
quick. I know you talked earlier how much you love the Hornet. That's your favorite aircraft. Did you ever get to do like a training or like a red flag against like the Air Force or other NATO nations where you actually got to go like either BFM or any kind of attack form with them, and you were just surprised how much better the Hornet was, essentially getting a simulated kill on something you didn't expect to win against?
Oh yeah, we flew against. I mean, we did all kinds of stuff. I mean, my favorite was when my division we killed 4 Raptors, and it's like, well, how's that possible? It's because they were contrails at 40,000 feet. We could see them for 50 miles, and we were able to employ on them visually with stuff that like with the AIM-9 and ranges that I can't talk about, and get away and stuff like that, where you're like, yeah, what's up, dude? You guys gotta be as stealthy as you are. If we can see you, you know, that's a problem. And then I got to fight, you know, Indian Navy Harriers, was a fun one. And but you know, there's F-16s and F-15s were probably the closest that you could have. You know, you can get beat by those pretty quickly if you don't employ your airplane to the best of your capabilities. So that was a lot of fun. I love doing it. I learned a lot from flying against National Guard and active duty Air Force F-16 pilots, what to do, what not to do. And everybody, F-16 guys and F-18 guys, everybody makes fun of the F-15 guys. So it's again, the rivalry stuff is awesome. But yeah, no, it was great. I even got to be in the back seat of an F-16 for a fight one time. and fly that from the back seat. That was a lot of fun, and it just made me appreciate. It's a capable airplane, but I love the Hornet.
That kind of actually brings up a side question I had. There's that MiG-23, I think it was, that crashed over in near Willow Run Airport a few weeks ago. Did you do any type of adversarial training against some of those ones that have been brought over from overseas here to
Yeah,
to
I
maintain?
never got to do any MiGs. I got to fight against Germans in the F4s, but I never got to fight against the MiGs. We had some Kafirs and some Hawker Hunters that weren't really capable, but never against like a French Super E or the Eurofighter or any. I never got to do any of that.
Let's.
Unfortunately, I got time for about one more, and then I'm gonna have to get Tom to practice. I'm sorry to cut it short this time, guys, because I love you. You get a fighter pilot talking to you.
Well,
I'll do it all night.
We're not going to let you go easy.
I'll quickly go to the last official question that was kind of on the list. I think we've covered everything. Please tell me an embarrassing Jack story. There's a heck of a lot of hell yes on that list. If you don't want to go that route, you told us about the story about getting into, I think it was Baghdad, and there was a show. Either you had called in a show of force, or if there was a show of force brought in. If you could just talk about that, that would, I think a lot of guys would enjoy that.
Yeah. Okay. So quickly, so funny thing, I don't. Jax was on the Cleveland, so he was on a different ship. So, but my favorite Jack story is rewind. I think I may have told it last time too, but Mike and I first met when he was in the S3 in ops for a CAX that we were doing. And he had been brought up, he's no longer platoon commander. He's stuck in this hellhole of operations where now he has to herd all these cats of young lieutenant platoon commanders. And he was always pissed off. He was not nice to me. And I was like, what's wrong with this guy? I was the second lieutenant, first detachment ever. And then here's Mike Jackson, S3 Alpha for, what was his name, Mike? Hirebind? Colonel Harbison.
Harbison, yeah.
Yeah. So and I remember sitting there, and he had this speed walk that he would go, and he was, because you're never supposed to run as an officer, but as the S3 Alpha, he had to be everywhere, and it was always because lieutenants weren't getting in reports on time, weren't doing this, weren't doing that. He was always mad. He was at this speed walk going around. So, and I used to remember just going like, oh my God, that sucks. Well, now fast forward, and we're platoon commanders together at the MSSG-13. And we are, he's got the engineers, and I've got the landing support tent, and everybody's just this fraternity. We are another buddy who's motor T, another buddy who's comm, and we are these happy lieutenants just having our fun time with our platoons. And they did not have an assistant ops S3 Alpha. And the only guy that had any, who was a lieutenant, how was it? I can't remember. It came down to nobody could come up. Oh, I know what it was. It was because it was the landing support battalion owed another officer for the S3 Alpha position. And the guy that they sent up, Kirk Spangenberg, was right out of log school. He was a brand new guy. He had no experience at all. And the MSSG headquarters said, well, we can't make this guy in operations. He's never even had to do a sit rep before. He's never even had to compile all this data. He has no idea what's going on. He's at least at the platoon level. He's got a platoon sergeant that can kind of give him guidance and teach him where to go. So when that happened, I went, oh no. And I lost my platoon. And it got made the S3 Alpha. And when that happened, Mike Jackson turned to me and went, "No, revenge is mine." And I remembered about 6 months into it, calling him up on the happiest ship in the ARG, the Cleveland, on the radio. And he's like, "How you doing over there?" I was like, "Oh my God, my life sucks." And he's like, "Ah." So, but yeah, so that was my favorite story of that for Mike and I. And I'm sure he remembers every bit of that too. But so real quick, I'll wrap up. Yeah, so the show of force one was that was in the town called Rawa, and it was two of us. We were overhead, and we were supporting an Army unit that was moving through the city while we were talking to this Air Force liaison officer. Hold on one second. Has Mom come yet? Okay, all right. 2 minutes, then we'll be ready. My son's keeping me on timeline. I love it.
Please tell your air boss we said thank you, by the way, too, for all of this.
Yeah. So they were moving through the city, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this British roundabout intersection, the entire intersection exploded. It was the biggest IED I'd ever seen in person or on video. I mean, it was, I don't know how many pounds of C4, I don't know what it was, but the whole thing went up. And then there was just silence on the radio. We thought we lost everybody. And then after about 30 seconds or so, they came up and came on the radio. Everybody was okay. And now it's like, okay, game on, let's do this. And they were getting lit up from these buildings over on the north side of town. And the first thing they called for was, oh, we need a show of force. And we're like, oh my God, why? It's just, the intent was, the noise of the jets, everything keeps their heads down so they can either withdraw or engage. But you had two F-18s with all this capability. You had a known area where the threats were, where the collateral damages could be done, and they want us to do a show of force. I was like, God damn it. So, but hey, you're an asset. So where we were in position, I had my wingman go down and hit the intersection, and about 600 miles an hour, boom, he goes up, and they're like, again, hit him again, hit him again. What are we gonna hit him with? My sound? And so I came in from a different direction. This is where it all, actually, I think they stopped happening after that, because the after action report we did really kind of said, hey dude, you keep doing this, you're gonna get one of us killed. Sure enough, they knew that these shows of force were going to happen. And when I hit the intersection and I rolled up on a wing, I looked over, and every building on that side of the city had heavy machine guns on it, and they all opened up at the same time. So, and anybody who's seen it before, with especially in the air, there's no sound, but it's like little flash bulbs going off, and it was just, oh shit, So today, hopefully, is not the day for the golden BB, but so I'm coming through at 600. All these little flash bulbs are going off, and I'm like, oh, you pull as hard as you can, put out as much expendables as you can. And as soon as I started doing that, all the guys on the radio started screaming that rockets were in the air. And as I turn back, I'm just seeing smoke trails that are already past me. So if one of those had guided, it would have been all over, and I would have been, on CNN with my head getting chopped off, probably on TV. It was pretty eye-watering that it was
Dodo,
happened that fast.
After I joined this group, and they told me that we were going to have an interview with you, and that you were on a PBS special, and I watched that PBS special. One of the things that really caught my eye was how the time went, where you guys, it just was a morale drain, that you weren't dropping. I mean, you had time. There was the one where he talks about, he did something and he could see everybody scatter and all that, and then he still called you off.
Yeah.
Well, there was a day, I want to call it somewhere in October, in Ramadi on Route Nova, right on the north part of the split of the river, and we had gone down into the field to get some of their IAD caches. We actually did find them. But we were coming across at dawnbreak, and there's a bridge there on Google Earth now that was not there. All that was there was a ramp building up to where they were going to pave over and then make a bridge, and the entire city opened up on us. I mean, It was just like you said, every machine. I mean, they had put a wall on there. We had a guy that was hiding behind a Sega Palm, just so they didn't see him. Wasn't going to stop any bullets. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell this story with an F-18, but it was an F-16 that came down across Route Nova, east to west, and it dropped flares. He was so low that I could see his visor, his gas mask, and the fact that his canopy was tinted yellow, and he dropped flares. And you're exactly right. everything that was shooting at us started shooting at him. In that moment, they wasted their RPGs and everything, and were afforded an opportunity to run across the road and jump into a trash ditch.
Yeah.
And that was all the difference. We were on a frying pan of farmland on the river that you'll see on the satellite photos there. We were asked out. We had no move to make. And just that, I mean, you probably
enough,
saved 300 people's lives with that one move right there. Sure. Would we have liked you to drop, anything
Oh
we
yeah,
could?
absolutely.
But we also had cap platoon double stacked on 2 lanes going all the way down to is a little circle intersection we called intersection Firecracker. So you really couldn't have done that either. But just that one, even the dust kicked off of all the buildings and the windows and
Yeah.
everything. I mean, it just boom, and it was like an instantaneous smoke screen where we're like, fucking move, just move right
Yeah.
now and dive into the trash,
Yeah.
And
Well, and that was when those were awesome. And I know the capability was there for us too, but unfortunately at that time they're like, well, we can't have them going that low, so they had us doing that at 1,000 feet. So it was like
he looked to the side to us. He looked to the side as he
I know.
went, and we're like, "Holy shit! I can see
Those
his
were the
eyes."
ones that are effective because you could do that, and being that low, you're actually protecting the people better, and you're protecting yourself better because you can get out of it. When you're at 1,000 feet,
No, they don't
everything
care.
is they've got you coming the whole way.
Yep.
So
Yeah.